This is Galaxy A55 versus Galaxy S21, the battle of the older versus newer mid-range. Let the battle begin. Today is a battle between one of the best mid-range phones and what could be the best valued old flagship phone of Samsung, which is Galaxy S21. Obviously, Galaxy A55 is the latest mid-range and could be priced a little bit higher than Galaxy S21, but on a used market, they would probably be the same. Today is a really good and sunny weather in the Philippines. We are in Mall of Asia in Manila Bay, taking some good pictures of sky, flowers, people, and random colorful things. We're also utilizing all sensors from the ultra-wide main sensor and the telephoto or macro on both phones depending on the model. Let's start with color profile and saturation, and Samsung Galaxy A55 looks very similar to the flagship S24 and S24 Ultra. It crushes the shadows a bit darker on those blacks, and you will see there's greater contrast than the competition. The colors are fairly neutral because of the contrast. It gives a little bit of punch to the colors like red and yellow, and in general you would see that it has a cooler white balance than Galaxy S21. Again, this is not consistent, but I should say 7 out of 10 images, Galaxy A55 will have a neutral tone. It manages the highlights a little bit, not a lot. There's a little bit more information on the strong light source, and has a wider field of view on the main sensor. I always need to adjust my shots when comparing both phones. What I like about the newer Galaxy A55 is the creamier background blur and the bokeh balls are bigger that makes it look like coming from a more expensive device. While the older Galaxy S21 is brighter, you will see that the subjects are better exposed on this phone, and look at the backgrounds like the shadows or the ceilings, you would notice that Galaxy S21 exposes the shadows a little bit better. Considering that S21 is a flagship sensor with a flagship processor, the HDR and dynamic range on this phone will always be better than a mid-range phone. Well, at least it's consistent on all the tests I have with mid-range versus flagship. The colors on S21 is a little bit more saturated than Galaxy A55. Looking at the colors blue, which is the sky, also the reds are popping out, and even the orange. The main sensor is a little bit punchy compared to the competition. I should say I'd like the wider field of view on Galaxy A55. It's giving away 5 to 10 degrees on the FOV. What I like about S21 is the dedicated 3x optical zoom. I always think that this is the way to go for a triple camera setup. You should have an ultra-wide, a main sensor, and a telephoto because you could always punch into the macro shots. Honestly, I think both phones are pretty solid choices for a camera phone. And speaking of punching in, if you go to the farthest zoom, Galaxy S21 will beat A55 by a mile. This is Samsung Galaxy S21 in 4K 30fps using the selfie camera. What I like about this phone is the flagship processor. Although it's older, it still has a great processor for gaming. We also have the 8K 24fps, although it's not 30fps, but you still have cinematic footage in 8K on Samsung Galaxy S21. Let's talk about portrait mode, and both phones are really good. I mean, if you're looking on a smaller screen, you didn't probably notice the difference. Feels like coming from the same Samsung phone. The first thing I noticed is the details on my face. Samsung Galaxy A55 has more details on the face. You would see the imperfections and the blemishes and even the facial hair if you do have it. By default, it has a creamier background blur, and if you have lights at the back or strong light source, you would see those big bokeh balls that feels like coming from a more expensive and bigger lens. The downside is you only have one focal length on this phone, so you need to move in and out with your feet. It has a warmer white balance. You will see a more yellowish skin tone or brownish skin tone depending of course on the subject's skin color, and you will have a stronger contrast looking at the darker shades of the shirt or even the hair. It's a tad stronger than the competition. One thing I noticed, and this might be subjective, but based from all the shots I've taken, I think Galaxy A55 because of the newer algorithm has better subject separation or cutout compared to the older Galaxy S21. While the older Galaxy S21 still has good subject separation or cutout, again, you wouldn't notice the difference on a blind test. Feels like coming from the same Samsung phone, but there's more misses on this phone than Galaxy A55. It has a smooth skin effect by default. You will see that it beautifies the image strongly, and if you look on the blur, it's a gradual blur that's usually reserved to a flagship device. What I love about the older Galaxy S21 is you have two focal length, which is 1x and 2x, which is a 24mm and 50mm shot. I think the biggest difference between the two is the low light portrait shot, where you would see that the Galaxy S21 performs better than Galaxy A55. It has a more natural looking skin tone and more details on my face. Going for the selfie shots, I was surprised by the sensor of the older Galaxy S21. It is superior than Galaxy A55. You will see more details on the face, and the colors are more vivid too. In terms of low light shot, I was surprised because even though one is a flagship phone and one is a mid-range phone, because they were separated by almost 3 years, I think the mid-range already caught up with the competition. There's not much of a difference between the two. It honestly took me a long time to process all the night shot images to make sure I capture all the differences. Galaxy A55 has better colors than the competition. You will see this on the greens, the reds, and the yellows. They are strikingly lively on this phone, but it also crushes the shadows like a typical S24 lineup. It gives you a more natural looking night shot. While the older Galaxy S21 is a little bit muted in terms of colors, and it's also brighter than the competition again because of the better and more powerful flagship sensor. I guess it will boil down to your preference. Would you like a darker but more colorful night shot or a brighter but more exposed night shot? Looking at all sensors, it's the same from the ultrawide to the main sensor, but only Galaxy S21 offers night shot on the 3x optical zoom. And this is Samsung Galaxy A55 using the selfie camera in 4K 30fps. What I love about this phone is the 5 years of software support. Obviously, if you want to keep both phones longer, then Samsung Galaxy A35 is the way to go. Looking on special camera features, only Galaxy S21 can shoot moonshot. I know there's a debate wherein they say this is a fake overlay layout of the moon, but still, Galaxy A55 does have this feature. Next is macro shot, and only Galaxy A55 because of the macro lens has it. But if you use the 3x optical zoom of Galaxy S21, you would actually get better looking and more colorful close-up shot. In terms of exposure, again, tendencies, I think all the shots I've taken, Galaxy S21 consistently exposes the dark areas better. And looking at sharpness, if we check the ultra-wide lens, I think it's a little bit better on Galaxy S21. On the main sensor, it's almost the same sharpness. And obviously, because S21 has a dedicated optical zoom, the 3x is sharper than the digital crop of Galaxy A55, and it also has a better 30x digital crop. And lastly, the 50 megapixel versus 64 megapixel battle. And if you look closely on the image, I think both phones has a good amount of details. I would give this a little bit on Galaxy A55. Right now we're doing the zoom test. So this is the ultra wide lens. Same color on the sky. And also the exposure. We're going to the main sensor. Same level of details and clarity. And now we're going to the 3x optical zoom versus the 2x digital crop of A35. And we're zooming in to the farthest zoom, 12x on S21 and 10x on A35. I think you have more details on Galaxy S21. A little bit noisier on the digital crop on A35. Let's start with the stabilization test of the ultra-wide sensor in 4K 30fps, and it's a little bit jerky on Galaxy S21. And this is the main sensor in 4K 30fps of both phones. And in terms of stabilization, I think they're almost the same. And even in the video quality, looks like the same phone. And lastly, on the rear camera, this is the 3x optical zoom of Galaxy S21 with good stabilization. There's no optical zoom on Galaxy A55. And this is the selfie video recording in 4K 30fps. Again, like the image test, this sensor on Galaxy S21 has better quality and superior than Galaxy A55. Now, this is the slow motion test for both phones, almost the same quality and level of noise. But if you go to the super slow motion, Galaxy S21 can go up to 18 seconds, while Galaxy A55 can only do 8 seconds. And lastly, low light video, and Galaxy S21 is brighter than A55, although you see more colors on the mid-range Samsung. And if you go to the ultra-wide lens, it's almost the same quality. Both videos are noisy. I think overall, Galaxy A55 is a solid choice this year. Comparing it with the flagship S series, this will compete with the older Samsung flagship. There will still be limitations, but this phone provides really good value. But if you're holding on to Galaxy S21 and thinking of moving on to the mid-range segment of Samsung, I mean, if you're big on the camera performance, you can still stick with the older S21 or maybe upgrade to an older S series above S21.